Welcome, everybody. This is the Full Court Press, where we apply pressure and hoopology knowledge with the topics going on in the NBA. I'm your host, Cal Lee, representing for the Baseline with my man Warren Shaw, doing his thing out in Las Vegas. The shot heard around the world. I mean, the LeBron bomb. My man decided to take it back home, where he is now going to take his talents back to the city of Cleveland. He is now going to be a Cavalier, and there's so many now underlying questions that have to be answered. And I felt it was only right to bring two of the most compelling personalities and people who definitely keep their finger on the pulse with things going on, not only with the Miami Heat, but with basketball in general. I got my man Diego Quezada, who is beat writer for Hot Hot Hoops. My man Diego representing. I'm sure that he's got so much to talk about with regards to the situation. What's going on, Diego?
It's going well. It's going well. All things considered, I figure it's best to think about the good times. Thankful for four great years.
I mean, it almost sounds like
perspective.
It almost sounds like we should be playing like Boys to Men in the background with that, that thought process. And also with me, I got my man Gerald Brown, one of the most poignant personalities that is going on right now in podcasting and radio. If you catch him on Wednesdays, he does an excellent show called the BlineSports Show. He has some great guests. I know I was on there just a few nights ago with my man Warren Shaw. You could also catch him on the weekends. He's doing his thing on Sirius satellite radio. What's going on, GB?
Not much, man. You guys got off a little too soon. Penny Hardaway came right on after you guys, probably about like 20 minutes afterwards.
You kicked us off, bro.
No, come on, man. Come on, man. It was round table to talk, man. I didn't feel like, you know what? We were going to be talking about this for at least probably another 2 days. So definitely, you guys missed Penny, man. Definitely got to do that again.
Listen, I am so looking forward to an opportunity to being able to bless the mic with you and with Fife and with Penny and anybody else that you have raring to go on the show, man. But you guys, you guys put together a really great program, and you leave the table open for people to discuss the topics, which is great, because I think it's all about the insight, and we've talked about that before. And so let's get right into it, man. I think a lot of people are getting a little too caught up into the whole scenario about LeBron James deciding that he wanted to go back to Cleveland, and that it's just this utter shocker. And I'm going to start with you, Diego. What was your overall reaction to the fact that LeBron made this announcement that he is deciding to go ahead and, play in Cleveland rather than re-signing up with the Miami Heat?
So, a couple of things. I think that it was not a shock to me. If you've been on Twitter, you've been seeing that this has been something that's been a possibility for the last couple of weeks. People on Twitter were talking about a plane that Dan Gilbert might be on that might have been headed to Miami. So it was known. You had one guy saying that there was a 90% chance that he was going to go back to Cleveland. What I took it to, and I was saying this to you before we went on air, is that I think it's very plausible that there are people in LeBron's ear, his agent, his family members, his close friends, that were telling him, go back to Cleveland. You know what? You won 2 rings in Miami, come back to Cleveland. You've got 2 kids, you got another baby on the way. You want to make the best choice for you and your family. And I think it was a combination of the pull of Cleveland, the fact that he's from there, that he has those roots there, and the fact that he was a little bit irked that Mickey Arison, decided to waive Mike Miller. He didn't really use any of his assets to get another quality piece last summer. He only got Greg Oden and Michael Beasley, 2 players who didn't play a meaningful minute in the NBA playoffs. And then you had Wade break down in the finals after they were trying to get him ready to play the last 2 rounds of the NBA playoffs by having him sit out 28 games. So I think it was the pull of Cleveland, but I also think there was a little bit of a push factor from the Heat.
So let me, and this is great. It's a great point that you made with regards to, how much influence LeBron James was going to receive in his decision-making process, that it wasn't just about the business of basketball as it was also the comfort level. So to me, I thought that the fact that this was dragging on a lot longer than I think we all thought was necessary was kind of giving a telltale sign that something was shifting. And Gerald, I know you remember this very similarly as well. Did this not happen when LeBron James was in the process of making the decision that all of a sudden a team out of nowhere where you never really thought or put much consideration into suddenly just leaps out as to be the front runners with regards to getting the best player in basketball? This is what happened to the Miami Heat. So it's almost as if, you know, it comes back full circle. How did you feel with regards to Pat Riley's and Mickey Arison's response to LeBron James' decision that he's deciding to go back to Cleveland and not come back to the Miami Heat?
Well, I think those were sort of a little fuel to the fire. I just think that it came down to a situation that, if you look at it, I often question that if the outcome of the NBA Finals perhaps would have been a little bit different, I think that would have perhaps persuaded him to be able to come back. But based upon the way they were dominated, he played, I think, an average of 40-plus minutes this season, and the sort of uncertainty of Dwayne Wade's health in regard to his knees. And then they just didn't have the flexibility. So I just thought that was sort of a little added fuel to the fire. You get rid of Mike Miller, as Diego mentioned. And I just think that all those are deciding factors that just led into it and saying, hey, I might need to go back home. And I think everything fell in place for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Because think about it this way. They started off the year, they bring in Mike Brown, a guy that they fired. They turn around and have him there. You had the whole situation with Dion Waiters and Kyrie Irving not really meshing too well. Anthony Bennett just turns out to be a bust. They end up, allegedly a bust last season, didn't get off to a good start. They get rid of their general manager. And then you figure, in less than 6 months, they land the greatest player, the best player in the league. On top of that, before that, I think the domino effect was you bring in David Blatt, which a lot of people just said, oh, no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to allow or lead LeBron back to Cleveland. But then there was rumblings about Kyrie Irving not staying. He decides to stay. So it's all of a sudden, things sort of fell. The pendulum was swung in favor of the Cleveland Cavaliers. And today was just, it's just really hard not to root for the city of Cleveland, because they were on the other end. They were on the other spectrum 4 years ago. So you got to feel great for them.
All right, let me follow up with a question for you, Gerald, in reference to what you just spoke about with how certain things fell into place. I thought that that this whole process was coming down to where LeBron James is and how he sees the Cleveland Cavaliers organization and the certainty about him being in a position to contend for titles in the same manner that he just spent the last 4 years contending for titles with the Miami Heat. And so you obviously look at these organizations, the Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers, and they are millenniums apart with reference to knowing what it is that you truly have. Now, we know that there's talent there in Cleveland, but in your honest opinion, given the fact that they were able to land LeBron James, how much does this significantly increase the Cavaliers' chances to actually win an NBA title?
I don't think it increases that much. I think, obviously, when we look at it and all the hoopla that's associated with it, this is a team that is not really ready to contend for a championship. I actually watched some of the Summer League game, and I was honestly saying that if they would have known what they know now, and I mean, I don't know, if that's the case in terms of the whole situation, they would have been better off, perhaps a little bit more advanced in regards to having a guy like Jabari Parker, perhaps playing LeBron at the 2 and Kyrie at the 3. Then I would say that perhaps that they would have had an opportunity to maybe even make some noise. But still, there's moves to be made. It's a question of how they're going to be able to entice the Minnesota Timberwolves to essentially give away Kevin Love, which I don't see them doing that. And, as I said before, they have a chance to contend, and that's the biggest thing. This is a team that didn't make the playoffs. They came off a horrible year after LeBron left. So I think that right now with the hoopla, and you never know. It's the East. You don't know what's going to happen with Indiana, Chicago. Anything can happen, but we all understand that at the end of the day, the San Antonio Spurs are still out there. And right now, they're nowhere near being prepared to be able to dethrone the San Antonio Spurs.
You're tuned to the Full Court Press, Cal Lee, with my special guests, Diego Quezada and Gerald Brown. Make sure that you catch these guys on the Twitter. They have the know-how, the 411 on things going on in the NBA. Catch my man Diego at Diego Heat NBA. And then make sure that you get at my man Gerald Brown at BlineSports. Diego, let me flip the question to you on the Miami Heat side. If you're Pat Riley and you have to quickly pick up the pieces, you know, this is the wreckage of now what's just basically happened with this decision made by LeBron James. Was it absolutely necessary that they throw the max money out to get Chris Bosh to re-sign with the Miami Heat? In other words, if you're Pat Riley, how much confidence are you going to have now knowing that you have to throw out max money in order to keep one of your big three players in Chris Bosh, and it's not LeBron James?
Well, so a couple things. I think it was interesting. There were a lot of talk before this announcement that maybe when LeBron left, that Pat Riley would leave too. Pat Riley is 69 years old. He was on sort of a year-to-year handshake deal with Mickey about when he would step down. But when you read his statement saying that we've been here before, we're going to do it again, we're going to remain as committed as we've always been to win championships and bring them to Miami, I think that maybe that lit a fire underneath Pat Riley, and he's going to want to stay with this roster and stay with this franchise for the next couple of years. But you know what? In the situation that they were in, when you have a situation in which Bosh is, you know, supposedly very close to working out a deal with the Houston Rockets, and then you hear that the Chicago Bulls are interested in Dwayne Wade, it was looking like that whole thing was going to collapse underneath you. And in the situation that they were in, I was fine giving Bosh rather that max contract. I mean, people were talking about, oh, well, in the 5th year of that deal, Bosh is going to be 35 years old. Well, I don't think that this is the same thing as giving Shaq a $100 million contract in 2005 as Pat Riley did then. That was a very big mistake. And Pat Riley gave Shaq the contract that Mitch Kupchak did not give him and would not give him. But in the situation that they were in, I think it was good that they gave Bosh that contract because you want to make sure you can keep something together. It is the East. It's wide open. You can win. You can make the playoffs without even having a 500 record. I think that they're still going to try to put forth a team that can contend in the playoffs out there. They're trying to get Luol Deng. And the fact is that once LeBron left, then you have all this money opened up, and you have to use it somehow. And we know that the Heat are going to pay Wade. And, you know, he's talking about maybe taking a little bit less money to give the team flexibility to maybe sign a Deng. But the fact is that when you have all that money come out, and by the way, you have a cap floor. If you have to spend $54 million on your team roster, you have to pay somebody, and that somebody's Chris Bosh. And I think that now the task for Eric Spoelstra is, I want to create an offense centered around Chris Bosh, because we know that Wade is on the downside. We know that Deng is a third option at this point. So Bosh is going to have to be that first option like he was in Toronto. So I think it wasn't a bad deal for Bosh or for the Heat, because in that situation that they were in, when you have Braun leaving, and when you have Bosh, thinking about going to Houston, and when you have Wade getting calls from Chicago, you have to do something to pick up the pieces. You can't just let everyone go by the wayside.
Gerald, are you buying into the fact that Chris Bosh getting this max deal is signifying that he is the man in Miami and that he wants to be the man? Aren't we just talking about the same Chris Bosh who had been rumors to saying well, whatever LeBron James does, I'm going to do. Meaning, if he decides to sign with Miami, I stay in Miami. And if you probably went to Cleveland, I might even consider going to Cleveland. This is all leading up to prior to the Houston Rockets giving that max deal. So now that the Miami Heat have put an extra year and some extra money in his pockets, are we now assertive in saying that Miami is confident that Chris Bosh is the man, and that Chris Bosh should be confident that he now suddenly becomes the man? Because that only changes the game now.
I just think that, I kind of disagree with Diego in regards to the whole situation with, Chris Bosh. I think that a couple of things. That, number one, he did want to stay in Miami, but that was all predicated on being able to play with LeBron James. I thought that he was pretty much good as going to Houston, which I still say from a basketball standpoint, that is a better move for him, because when he was in Toronto, carrying a load wasn't his sort of thing, and you need an extra sidekick. And I just think that this was an act of desperation by the Miami Heat to really go out and throw a ton of money at him. I mean, you're talking about almost $30 million more, if I'm not mistaken, doing the math, than the Houston Rockets were going to offer him. And I still think that the Miami Heat, nor Pat Riley, as well as Mickey Arison, wanted to really have a day filled with them pretty much losing two individuals that were really pivotal to the success of the Heat organization. And thus they overpaid drastically. Now the question is, how much are they going to overpay for Dwayne Wade to even opt out of that contract, which he did? And then on top of that, you're going to have to re-sign Udonis Haslem, as well as how much money are you going to be able to offer guys like Trevor Ariza, as well as Luol Deng, and you're going to pretty much grossly overpay for those guys. So I just don't understand the move. I thought Houston was a better fit outside of the money, because he didn't have to come in there and be the guy. I don't think he's going to do well in terms of being the guy. He's not really that sort of number one option, if you will, especially of a team that's coming off of 4 consecutive NBA Finals.
Do you think that, Diego, let me ask you, do you think that Eric Spoelstra has to change the offensive system now that Chris Bosh is going to be that go-to guy? Let's keep in mind, they still believe in an up-tempo type of offense. They still believe in transition-style type defense. Even though Dwayne Wade is not as athletically quick as he was, he's still one of the faster two guards in the game when his knees are right. So obviously the idea is to put bodies around that can fly around the basketball. I didn't see that with, you don't really see that with Mario Chalmers. You don't really see that with Udonis Haslem. So is the idea to change the system around if you're going to get these veteran-laden guys back on to playing for the Miami Heat, or you got to go with the more younger athletic bodies because they're going to change the system around the fact that Bosh is really their best athletic player at this point?
I mean, I think you have to. I think there's not a real choice, because I think he's going to be the highest paid player on the team. I think Wade is due for a pay cut, and he is going to be the best player on the team, because if you get Ariza or Deng, Bosh is still going to be the best player, because Wade, as I said, is on the downside. So you have to reconfigure that offense. And it's interesting. I mean, Eric Spoelstra did revamp their offense after that first year of the Big Three had the pace and space offense, when you want to get out and run and space the floor. That's when he wanted to have Chris Bosh extend his range out to the three-point line and also play smaller. So you play Shane Battier as a 4 and have Bosh at the 5. So I think he's going to have to go back to the drawing board and see what positions are we going to be in, so we can have Bosh as the number one option, but still have Wade and still have Deng and still have some other guys that can come in there and also chip in, because Wade, even at 32, Bosh never played with a Wade type player in Toronto. And I also want to respond to something that Gerald said about, maybe Houston was the better basketball fit. You know what? I'm not so sure about that, because you have a situation in which you would be going to the Western Conference, in which it's very tough. You know, the Houston Rockets didn't make it past the first round last year. They lost to the Portland Trail Blazers. We see how crazy it is every year when the San Antonio Spurs can get it to the #1 seed, lose in the first round to a bigger, stronger team that's a good matchup for them in the Memphis Grizzlies. And on top of that, you also have a situation in which, you know what, James Harden doesn't play defense. What do they do on their bench? What's their bench? Are you really just going to pay all that max money to Harden, Dwight Howard, Chandler Parsons, and Bosh, and you're just going to get guys off the scrap heap and hope that you can survive in the Western Conference where you have to play all 82 games and you have all these crazy playoff series? You still have the OKC Thunder, and I mean, it looks good on paper to have that. And Cal and I were talking about this earlier. It looks good to have that on paper when you have Bosh offensively slotting over to the 4. But does that put them ahead of San Antonio? Does that put them ahead of OKC? Does that put them ahead of the Clippers? I'm not sure yet, and I think people were saying, oh, they're automatically going to make it because they get Bosh. Bosh is a very good player, but, I mean, winning is very random. I was telling this to Cal earlier as well. The Lakers, as good as they were in the Western Conference, almost didn't win 2 of their 3 championships. In 2000 against the Portland Trail Blazers, in Game 7, they were down by double digits in the 4th quarter of Game 7. And in 2002 against the Sacramento Kings, Game 6, they were down 3-2. They almost lost that game. I mean, even for the Heat, they were within a whiff of going 1-3 in the finals. They went 7 games to the Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics. It's very, very hard to win a championship. And whether you're Chris Bosh in Houston or LeBron in Cleveland, it's going to be very, very tough to do. So I don't think taking the money is really a bad deal for Bosh.
Yeah, I just want to respond.
Yeah, sure, please. This is why we call it the full court press, please.
Yeah, the only reason why, and I'll say this, Diego, you bring up some great points, but I just think of it this way. As an athlete or just anybody from a competitive nature, I would tend to believe that this whole notion that guys want to avoid the Western Conference and take the easy route in order to get to the NBA Finals, let's keep in mind, if you're going to win a championship, you're going to have to beat a Western Conference team. You're going to have to beat the best. And the thing is, you go to a team that's pretty much, yes, it was a young team that really defensively, team defense, it was not the case whatsoever. But his presence in terms of his championship pedigree would fit in very well in terms of a guy being able to play alongside Dwight Howard, a stretch 4, that really brings in that sort of experience would have helped that team. And in regards to, the San Antonio Spurs, I think on paper, if Chris Bosh goes to Houston, he would have been, yes, they would have been better than the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's keep in mind, it's all about matchups when it comes down to the Western Conference playoffs. It's all about matchups. And the one thing that really changed the game this year, Serge Ibaka gets hurt in those 2 games, and then Boris Diaw, Popovich makes the change in the game, I think it was Game 4, and all of a sudden we have a situation where, Game 5, now all of a sudden it makes the change, and Scott Brooks and Oklahoma City Thunder didn't make any adjustments. But that team right there, in terms of what they were able to offer, and there were talks about them also bringing back Chandler Parsons, they were a very, very dangerous team. A dangerous team that, again, in their first year, they made the playoffs. Yes, they went out in the first round, but let's keep in mind, it did go 7 games. It was the Western Conference, and I clearly believe that as a competitor that a guy like Chris Bosh can be, if you have the type of horses around you, why not want to go to war against the best? Instead of playing every single night or every other night, you're playing your Milwaukee's, you're playing your Detroit Pistons. There's no fun in that. You want to play against the best night in and night out. And that's where you basically assess where you are as a franchise.
Man, some really great points from both of you guys. This is the Full Court Press. Cal Lee with my special guest, Diego Quezada from Ha Ha Hoops. He's the Heat beat writer. And then also one of the illest shows that's going out right now, the BlineSports Show with my man Gerald Brown. And we're discussing the situation with LeBron James and the decision to. He decides to take his talent back to Cleveland. The prodigal son has returned home. Let's talk legacy, fellas, because this was something that I don't know whether or not it really has been talked about, but it raises a very, very high level of concern for me. In my estimation, and I know I could be wrong because I like to do my crazy talk every now and again, I personally felt that this was a decision LeBron James made 2 years too soon. With that being said, now the pressure and the onus is on LeBron James delivering that championship. If he does not deliver on this championship with this next go-around with the Cleveland Cavaliers, what does this now do to his legacy? I'm going to start with you, Gerald. What do you think happens to LeBron James if he does not come through and give the Cavaliers this much desperate championship that they've been seeking since its existence?
Not at all. Nothing at all. I think clearly with him coming back home, and one of the things that I thought was so important that he made sure he said his roots and ties to Northeast Ohio is bigger than basketball. And he also specified in that essay that I'm not promising any championships. It is tough. I mean, for all that he's done, let's keep in mind, yes, he went to Miami to win championships. But when he was in Cleveland, he was clearly the best player in the league. And that's something that's undeniable. It's a question of, once again, how much talent will they surround him? You know, the decision to select Andrew Wiggins. If Andrew Wiggins doesn't pan out and Jabari Parker becomes a stud, you know, that's not his fault. Give him the surrounding pieces he needs in order to fulfill that. He came back there, and I think that's the biggest thing that you can ask of him whatsoever. At least we're talking about championship contending once again with the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't think it hurts his legacy at all.
Diego, I wanted to get your take on that. Do you think that his legacy is going to be impacted if he doesn't deliver a championship for the Cleveland Cavaliers?
I think absolutely it would. I mean, everyone right now is talking about praising LeBron James, and I'm not going to begrudge him for that. His letter was very mature. It was very well written and everything. But it's all good right now. But what happens when you go into the playoffs? I mean, people forget that it was in 2010 in the conference semifinals against the Cleveland Cavaliers when there were rumors about him maybe having his elbow injured, that he, you know, had that weird Game 5 in which the Cavs got blown out, and he got a lot of questions. Then in Game 6, when there were 2 minutes left and the Cavs didn't foul, you know, people were questioning that. So everyone is going to praise him now, but what happens when they start playing games? What happens when you start going to the playoffs? And to me, that's when it's all going to start back again. It's all going to come back again, because once that conference semifinals series against the Boston Celtics happened, everyone forgot about the time that he actually scored 45 points in Game 7 against the 2008 Boston Celtics, a great, great team, one of the better championship teams. Everyone forgot about in 2007 when he scored, 25 points in a row against the Pistons. Everyone forgot about that and focused all on what was wrong with him. Why did he play so badly in those games against the Celtics? He even had his own owner after he left saying that he quit on the team. So, you know, everyone's saying that, you know, I think that if he wins one championship, then he'll be a folk hero forever. He doesn't need to win 2 or 3 or 4 more championships. If he just wins one in Cleveland, it's going to be bigger than anything he's ever done before. But I think he needs to win one. And especially when he, you know, if they don't win in year 1 and year 2, then you'll start to hear that all those voices creeping up back. But I think he needs to win one, because he said that he wants to win a championship in Cleveland, and we'll see if he can do it.
Yeah, Cal, I want to jump in and just say that, you know what, I think it's kind of, you know, I think it's kind of unfair, and I think it's just so weird, because this whole legacy talk, and in terms of needing the championship to sort of define your legacy, I don't know when this started. You know, we talk about guys like Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan and all these other guys. Well, these guys played on ready-made teams. I mean, keep in mind, Michael did not win a championship until he had Scottie Pippen. But at the end of the day, we all knew that he was still the greatest player to play the game. You know, so does that mean that we take away from the legacy that is established by guys like Karl Malone, John Stockton, Charles Barkley? It just seems like this all of a sudden took form when it came to LeBron James. Oh, he needs a championship. Don't get me wrong. As a competitor, you strive to win a championship. But in terms of his greatness, look, he won 2 championships and 2 MVPs, in Cleveland. He doesn't need to win anything else. When do we start putting the focus and the onus on management and ownership? Yeah, you know, that whole situation that transpired when in Game 5 against the Boston Celtics or Game 6 against the Boston Celtics, he took a team that, if you could name me 4 of the other guys that played with him against the San Antonio Spurs to the NBA Finals, if that wasn't enough to solidify his legacy as one of the great ones, and then put the onus on management to put the necessary pieces around, it's not about him. And his legacy is pretty much, it's already situated. Him going back to Cleveland, it's like, hey, I'm coming back to help this team win. And I think he hit it right on the head in that essay. It's not all about him. It's bigger than basketball. What he means to that Cleveland economy, that Northeast Ohio area, that's one of their own. That's all that they should help for. And now let's put the onus and the focus on David Griffin and Dan Gilbert to get the necessary pieces to support LeBron being able to get this done.
I don't think.
You had a quick point, Dan.
Quickly. I mean, I don't think that it's not unfair. I agree that it is unfair. And as I said, it's very hard to win a championship. It involves a lot of luck. But I think that that's just what it turns to. And especially when you're dealing with LeBron James, who's the most scrutinized athlete out there. He was on Sports Illustrated when he was 16 years old. I think it's going to come back to that. So, yeah, I don't really disagree, but I think with the narrative that's always created with this person, it's going to go back to that.
But when did that happen? Like that's
the
biggest question.
Him.
Like with LeBron,
it happened with him.
We all heard that he needs to win a championship. I never heard that with Charles Barkley. I never heard that with John Stockton. I mean, if they did, you know, they got to the finals, they didn't win, and their legacy is established, it's intact. I mean, I don't know Patrick Ewing's legacy. They are great players. I just don't. It just, for some reason, this has formulated this whole talk, and it's just been totally unfair. It's almost in a sense, an attack on him, and in regards to sort of make sure that he doesn't replace the great ones like Bird and Magic and Michael Jordan, you know. And it's unfortunate because we want to hold on to those great players and think that nobody's ever supposed to be able to replace them. But I just think that it's crazy in terms of his legacy, you know. I think it's intact.
It was because it came out and people thought he was going to be the next Michael Jordan. That's why.
Who said that? Who said that? That's what I'm saying. See, the thing about it is,
everyone was saying that.
No, but he never gave himself that nickname. That, like, people got upset because they would say, "Oh, King James, he's a king." He never gave himself a nickname. I mean, he has been the most scrutinized athlete.
Yes.
In this past decade. I mean, I used to think it was Alex Rodriguez at one time, but I mean, it's just some of the things that's put on him. I think it's totally unfair, and it's all because the fact is, case in point, when Mark Jackson, calling the NBA Finals, says that he's better than, he replaces Magic and Bird, everybody went crazy. Oh, no, he can't. No, why? Anybody can see that he's better. He's done more than both of those guys combined, you know, offensively and defensively. But people do not want to give this gentleman his credit or his just due. And it has nothing that he's doing. He's not going around promoting himself at all. You know, somebody gave him a nickname. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Well, both of you guys have brought interesting points to the table, and trust me, I think that this is another conversation that can definitely be had again on another show. There's no question about that. I will leave it to this much. I see both of your guys' points, and I will say this, you know, Gerald, that the problem that I think that exists right now is, and I was just saying this because this to me is really the funny part. If the Cleveland Cavaliers cannot win a championship with the best player in basketball on LeBron James, I don't know if they'll ever win a championship. I would almost feel like that this organization, this team, is going to be hexed like the Chicago Cubs or like the Boston Red Sox. That they're basically going to have to figure out a way to shake off their Joe Boo in order for them to finally win a championship, because it just can't play out this way. You know, we talk about, you know, greatness, and we're putting that tag on LeBron James because of the things that he has accomplished. But the things that I also think about too is he spent 7 years in Cleveland, and he couldn't take what was going on over there with management, and so now it's the same person that owns the team, and he's basically giving him a second chance, right? So, I mean, as much as I want to sit there and say, yeah, you know, LeBron, I'm going to feel bad for you. But then I'm going to kind of not feel bad for you because you knew exactly what you were dealing with the second time around. Like, I've been still trying to figure out what exactly has changed from the time frame that Dan Gilbert wrote that letter and left the letter on that website all the way up until the time that he found out that LeBron had actually been contemplating the idea that he would want to come back to play with Cleveland. What has the Cleveland Cavaliers done in that span of the 4 years that LeBron has been gone that has made you feel like if there was ever a chance or an opportunity to bring him back, to make him feel like we're going to get it right for you this time, what suddenly was said or what was suddenly changed? Because to me, that's going to be the bigger question, and that's now going to only be answered until we see what basically gets put out on that floor the next whatever years that he decides to sign to be with the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Well, Cal, I say this just to pretty much respond to that. I think what really has changed that, if you look at it, which was a big piece in terms of a guy like Kyrie Irving staying. And I mean, listen, you know, Kyrie in terms of being able to stay and stuff, and you know, he wanted to try to finish the job, but I would be sitting up here lying if I didn't say that enormous amount of money, I believe it was $90 million, as a 22-year-old young man, was something that was very difficult to turn down. So then you have this fall into place, and then we all know the expectation and the sort of mark for greatness label that's been thrown upon a guy like Andrew Wiggins. You know, I think those were kind of the little factors. But keep in mind something that, you know, right now it's all basking in the glory of him going back to Cleveland. He did interview with other teams, or better yet, his agent met with the Phoenix Suns, met with the Los Angeles Lakers. So it wasn't just cut and dry that it was the Miami Heat and the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think it was really the sentimental pull of, hey, my family wants to go back home. They already have a couple pieces in place. But, I mean, he could have potentially gone to maybe the Phoenix Suns if they would have had a little bit more, you know, more intact right there then and there. Because if that was the case, his agent would have never met with those other teams. That wasn't the case at all. So I just think it was part wanting to go back home, and it'll be a great sort of storyline that if he wins a championship there, they'll build a monument. If he gets them to the finals again, they're going to build a statue. Regardless, they're going to build a statue of LeBron James in downtown Cleveland. That's a done deal. But I just think that, again, he's a businessman, and it was so much more to gain off the court with him going back. Look, ESPN has been talking about this for the last 16 hours. They're going to probably do 24 hours of this. Everybody's talking about it.
Let me just make sure I preface this, Gerald. And what I'm saying is that if LeBron James takes a hit on his legacy, it's not to say that he doesn't still be considered one of the greats in the game. What I'm saying when I say is in taking a hit in his legacy is that he struck out the first time trying to win a championship in Cleveland. He strikes out the second time trying to win a championship in Cleveland. And it's not even so much the fact that he couldn't help them win a championship while he was on the back end of his career. He's at the prime of his career. You see what I'm saying? The idea is that he wants to so badly come back and win that championship after doing what he just did with another team that was struggling in that same regard. The Miami Heat was not a team that magnified success across the board. That was a pipe dream with Dwayne Wade having Shaquille O'Neal and they making that miraculous 4-game run on the Dallas Mavericks to win a championship. Outside of that, the Miami Heat has only had one particular gap, like one particular spot where they looked like a team that was destined to be a relevant team for some years, and that was the rivalry that they always had with the New York Knicks. But the New York Knicks was so much a thorn in their side, they never saw the potential of what that team could be. And that's when the Eastern Conference was a dominant conference. So what I'm saying is that when LeBron James is saying, I'm going to come back home and I'm going to do this, he's now putting this kind of pressure on himself at this point in his career where he is the best player. He's asking for the max money, right? And so now, if he doesn't bring that championship, you know, like I said, I think he takes a hit on his legacy as being that guy because of the fact that this is a small market team. It's the Cleveland Cavaliers, has not won a championship, and the best player in the game, who wasn't Michael Jordan, who wasn't Larry Bird or Magic Johnson or Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, couldn't get that team to win a championship. And mind you, during that span of this 4 years, it wasn't as if the Western Conference was the most dominant conference. The Miami Heat was the best team in 2011 when they played against the Dallas Mavericks. The Miami Heat was still the better team when they did win that championship against the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Miami Heat, even to some regards, even though they didn't look like the best team against the San Antonio Spurs, found a way to beat the Western Conference. So they're just as relevant. They were just in a bad conference, but they still came out as the best team because they were always the best team because, quote unquote, they had the best player. So, like I'm just saying, I completely agree with where you're coming from, but I just don't want it to be misconstrued that when I say take a hit on the legacy, it just utterly means that he is now forever shamed. There's no shame. The man's got 2 rings and he's going to break records.
Let me ask you this, Cal. In regards to that, do you think that in regards to his legacy, does that take away from the fact that he is the greatest basketball player in the league? So I think the thing is,
you're saying in the league, though. You're saying in the league. Are you saying one of the greatest basketball
player, one of the greatest basketball players of all time?
He's already top 10.
He's already in that conversation. I'm sorry, Diego. You had something else you wanted to.
No, I was just saying he's already top 10. I think if he retired today, he'd be in the top 10. So it doesn't matter what he does, but I do think if he doesn't win a championship, I agree with Cal. People will start asking questions, and we'll just have to see. We'll have to see what other players are with him. We'll have to see what happens in the playoffs. Does he continue playing well, and is it just a matter of him not having the help, or is it a matter of him not, maybe coming through in the past?
Okay, I don't want to cut you guys off because I did have one other last question to ask you guys with regards to this situation with LeBron James making this decision, and that's in regards to Andrew Wiggins. Gerald, you had brought this up about Andrew Wiggins and about whether or not, can he pan out? We were talking about how the intent is that the Cleveland Cavaliers drafted this kid, and the presumption would be that he is going to be another quote-unquote face of the franchise, because are we saying that Kyrie Irving was the face of the franchise for the Cleveland Cavaliers? Has he lived up to the expectations of being donned that particular kind of moniker? So now that you draft a guy like Andrew Wiggins who plays the same position as LeBron James, and you're not intending to move him, if you're Andrew Wiggins, how does that make you feel? How do you take that? Do you take it as a blessing that I'm going to be playing next to LeBron James? Or do you take it as an insult that you don't have an opportunity to play against the best? I reference back to the day when Allen Iverson was drafted by the Philadelphia 76ers. You can't tell me that he wasn't biting at the chomp to say, I want to go one-on-one with the greatest player in the game right now, who's Michael Jordan. And to be able to have that moment, do you think that Andrew Wiggins now has that moment robbed from him because of what just happened now with LeBron James' decision? You still there, Jared?
I think he left.
Oh, I think he froze up. Diego, yeah. I'll go ahead and pose that question to you.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting because I remember when he got drafted, he actually said, we'd make a good pair, LeBron and myself. So when he said that right when he was getting drafted, no one was really talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers yet as a free agent destination. I think that did signal something that perhaps maybe he was excited to play with them. But it'll be interesting to see how they really mesh and how they really play together, because they have a couple options. Do you play LeBron at the 4 and have Wiggins at the 3 and Dion Waiters at the 2? I also think it'll be interesting to see how LeBron plays with Kyrie Irving. Is Kyrie Irving going to come off more and play off the ball more? Because I don't know if we've actually seen him play off the ball that much. Is he going to have to be more of a spot-up shooter, a guy who makes cuts to the basket? So, you're right. You bring up a great example of Allen Iverson. everyone who knows basketball knows the time when Allen Iverson crossed up Michael Jordan, and that was a great moment in his career. The fact that you can come out and do that against the world's best player and a very good defensive player who won the Defensive Player of the Year a couple times.
I mean, we don't even talk about the amount of points that Allen Iverson has scored, which is top 5 in the NBA.
Yeah.
We do talk about what he did to the best player in the game at that time and crossing over on Michael Jordan. And I'm just saying, when you're a young kid and you have aspirations of playing in the NBA and you are being talked about as being considered the best player in the game, possibly, right? The only way that you're going to be able to validate that thought process is by going out there and playing against the best player. It doesn't happen doing it one-on-one drills in practice or in OTAs or anything like that. It has to happen real live under the bright lights in a critical game situation or in a game situation where it's your first time on the court and the first person that you have to play up against, the person that's got to D you up, is the best player in the game. That's your moment to shine. And I felt like if we're going to start giving guys like Andrew Wiggins and Kyrie Irving that kind of props, that it can only be validated when they're playing up against the best players in the game. And I just wonder if whether or not a guy like Wiggins is going to get robbed of that opportunity because of the fact that LeBron James has his own agenda in trying to help bring a championship to the Cleveland Cavaliers.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have to see what happens. I think if the Cavaliers struggle, which I think it's very plausible that happens. I mean, the Heat struggled out of the gate when they first got together in 2010, 2011. You may see a renewed sense of urgency among people in the Cavaliers front office about maybe including Andrew Wiggins in a trade for Kevin Love. And I think that in terms of Wiggins, he's pretty much the only real young piece, aside from Kyrie Irving, who I don't think they're going to trade because they just signed him to that max contract, who really has a lot of trade value. I mean, Anthony Bennett, nobody really knows what he can offer on the NBA level. I mean, people are saying that he's in the best shape of his life, and he looks good in the summer league, but we have to see what happens on the real NBA. There are a lot of players who do well in the summer league, but then don't pan out in the actual NBA. He's that only piece who really, as of now, has a real good trade value, and you need to give up something to get something, because other teams are also vying for Kevin Love. The Lakers, the Golden State Warriors. I mean, I think maybe the Houston Rockets might try to do something now that they missed out on Bosh. So the fact is that if the Cavaliers struggle out of the gate, I think you may see some rumors about Wiggins being on the block, and then you'd have a case in which Wiggins would be able to have a team to himself. But we'll have to see. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts. We could be in a very different place, 72 hours from now, or even, once the season gets started in October.
All right. Well, this is the Full Court Press. Cal Lee with my my guest, Diego Quezada, who's a Miami Heat beat writer for Ha Ha Hoops. And we also had our boy Gerald Brown from the BlineSports Show. Unfortunately, we had technical difficulties, and I'm not sure whether or not he's trying to, reconnect himself back on with us. But, as we basically round out the show, real quick, Diego, there was also some really crazy transactions and acquisitions that were done after the LeBron James decision. I mean, obviously the counteroffer by the Miami Heat in order to retain Chris Bosh, the 5-year, $100+ million deal. I mean, yes, that seemed pretty crazy, but of all of the other acquisitions that you had kind of was tracking yourself, which one that happened today outside of the Chris Bosh move has had you really scratching your head? Was just like, what in God's name is going on right now?
I'll tell you, the one thing that really struck my eye was the Los Angeles Lakers and what they did. I mean, because they got Jeremy Lin for a bunch of draft picks pretty much, which I understood a little bit because they didn't really have a lot of draft picks. They traded a lot of them away, and so you want that added flexibility. But then they offered Nick Young a new deal. They got Jordan Hill a new deal. Apparently they offered Pau Gasol a deal that he turned down. And it just seems to me like they have apparently seeded another year. So they're pretty much going to say, okay, we're not going to get Melo, so we're just going to tank for another year. I mean, you're not going to really do all that better, even if Kobe Bryant is back there, because he is 35, 36 years old, and you're losing Gasol, who was their top scorer last year. So the question is, like, are you really going to have another year of Kobe Bryant on your team, and you're just going to give it up? What's going to happen next? Are you just going to bank on Kevin Love? I mean, that's a franchise that really, since they lost to the Dallas Mavericks in 4 games in 2011, has really not figured out a way to get back into contention. They tried to get Chris Paul, didn't work out because Stern nixed the trade. You have Steve Nash and Dwight Howard. That's been a disaster for 1 year. And now they wanted to tank so they could get Melo. And while Melo was interested in their offer, apparently he's moved on to either the Bulls or the Knicks. So that was very interesting, the fact that they just moved on so quickly and offered a lot of money to Nick Young and a lot of money to Jordan Hill in terms of pretty much giving up another season. And I guess to take from it would be that they're just going to tank for another year.
Yeah, I can be honest with you. I wasn't really sure where that trade was going. It almost made me feel like it was Tobey Maguire that executed the trade and not Mitch Kupchak. I think that Mitch Kupchak had an out-of-body experience, and or even if anything, if Mitch Kupchak isn't going to basically take accountability for it, then you basically know who it was that wanted this to happen, and that's probably Jim Russ, because he's all eye candy on Linsanity and probably sees money being made off of what I perceive is supposed to be the craze that especially in a market like LA, he can profit off of it. I mean, he seriously could profit off of it. So I guess it's their Masahiro Tanaka of the NBA now in getting Jeremy Lin. And I guess if you're going to have someone that's going to play like Steve Nash, he's one of those guys. I mean, defense is Olay, offense he could be a lightning rod, but he is such an extreme, and I just don't know where that fits in the system for like the Los Angeles Lakers. I guarantee you, though, he would have basically been the son that Mike D'Antoni wish he had never had he decided to stay coaching that team. One last trade I wanted to get at you before we jump off, my man, is the Suns on their sign-and-trade deal in getting Isaiah Thomas. And this one was reported by Adrian Wojnarowski from Yahoo Sports that the Suns and Kings finalized a sign-and-trade deal on a 4-year, $27 million deal for Isaiah Thomas, who was the starting point guard for the Sacramento Kings. And if people were not aware of what this kid lit up the board. He basically got his opportunity, got his minutes, and he completely maximized it. And now he's literally going to be, I guess what you can say, is the third best point guard for the Phoenix Suns. What is the Phoenix Suns doing? And how in God's green earth is Jeff Hornacek going to pull this off, being able to get all three of these guys viable minutes to create this kind of havoc offense that the Suns displayed last season?
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I was reading a lot about, what is Sacramento doing. And it's interesting because Isaiah Thomas is not – I mean, I thought that there was actually a pretty good bargain for that deal, because if you actually look at his stats were pretty comparable to
20 points per game, three rebounds, about 6.5 assists per game. So very comparable to Kyrie,
who was the #1 pick, and Isaiah Thomas was the 60th pick in the draft. So it was interesting to me that they gave him up. I don't know what the Kings are going to do, but in terms of the Suns, it is interesting. They did shock everybody. I don't think anyone anticipated them having that good of a year. Almost made the playoffs. It'll be interesting. I think what you're going to see is you might see future moves. I think that's the only way. That's the only explanation. But I could be wrong. I mean, even the Heat. I mean, they had Sean Marion and Michael Beasley on the same team, and I know people were saying back then that the Heat wouldn't draft Michael Beasley if they already had Sean Marion on that team, and they played both together in the same starting lineup. Actually ended up starting Haslam with those two guys, so they may do something really crazy with that lineup, but I don't know. I'm inclined to think that they're going to make some other moves.
Yeah, but what's going to happen to Gerald Green, man? I mean, that's another shooting guard type point guard. So that's 4. I'm sorry, 5.
Yeah.
You know, it's like this. I mean, I feel it's like that's too much. I just really want to understand what the game plan is with a guy like Isaiah Thomas, because I really think that he deserves the 30+ minutes to be on that court. And he is productive. So, you know, I get it. If the idea was that you were going to move Bledsoe, you might move Green, and you can still have your 3 quality point guards. But you re-sign Tucker, and then now you get Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas is a great kid, but there had been, you know, some talks about the fact that, you know, he did not like the idea that he was never truly considered a starter when he felt that he was playing at the starter level.
Yeah.
Remember when they had Grievous Vasquez, and it was and, you know, Smart was sharing time between the both of those guys, and it was very evident that Isaiah Thomas was the better point guard at that time, and he wasn't getting those minutes. So how does Jeff Hornacek keep a guy like, you know, Isaiah Thomas happy just because you're giving him a $28 million, you know, 4-year, $28 million deal? How do you keep Bledsoe happy? They obviously think that one of these guys is not fully 100%, and they want to make sure that they obviously can compete at a high level. So it'll be very interesting to see what Hornacek puts together. But, man, I just feel like that's absolute point guard overload. It's like, you know, the fantasy basketball, and you know that you can't get a quality center, so you just overdraft the guards.
Yeah.
So very interesting stuff. I got to tell you, man, Diego, man, we had a great conversation, and you gave such great insight that I think not too many people have given themselves an opportunity to really take in with regards to this whole situation with LeBron James. I know everybody is stuck on the fact that he is going back to Cleveland, but there's so many more moving parts, and there's so much that is going to transcend because of this move, and because of the fact that the Cleveland Cavaliers have put themselves in this position, and how this is going to impact all of the remaining free agents that are left available, and what teams are going to have to do in order to get at these guys. I think that if anything else, it's now raised the stakes, that they're going to have to throw a lot more on the table, or if not, we're going to see a whole lot of movement come trade deadline time when during by the time that the All-Star break happens for the NBA. Diego, give everybody a little more info on what you got going on and what you got dealing with Ha Hoops.
Yeah, so today I wrote the story about Bosh and Wade coming back, and also about the Heat going after Luol Deng. I imagine once those stories break, whether Deng or Ariza, what happens with the Heat? Are they going to actually sign McRoberts and Danny Granger? What's going to happen with the Heat? I'll be there. I know that I was told to just be on standby tomorrow, so you should be hearing whenever something's happening. The Hot Hoops will have it ready for you as soon as this story breaks. So just be there, and you'll have insight and analysis, breaking news. Everything will be there, right there for you, one-stop shop.
Most definitely. Hot Hoops affiliated or powered by SB Nation, correct? And where is it that people can go to in order to check out Hot Hoops? What's the website?
It's just hothoops.com.
All right, and then so my man, you should get on my man Diego. If you got any questions, he'd be more than happy to address them, and keep on the lookout, because he does post some interesting information with regards to things that are going on, not just with the Heat, but with the NBA in general. Be sure you get at him at Diego Heat NBA, correct?
Yep.
And so, again, man, awesome show. I want to thank my man Gerald Brown from the BlineSports Show. Gerald Brown, just one of the most poignant figures that we got going on, podcasting, discussing NBA hoops. He does an excellent show with his boys, Penny Hardaway, Charles Oakley, and Fife Dog, which I had the honor of being on the same show discussing hoops with him and stuff like that. So it was just a great time that we had, and I look forward to being able to politic with him some more as the as this offseason continues to unfold, and more drama is continuing to build up. So once again, I'd like to thank everybody from here, from you and yours, far, near, and wide, checking out the Full Court Press. This is your boy, Cal Lee. We appreciate you guys. Have a great night, and we'll catch up with you next time.
Good talking to you, Cal.
All right, man.
Yeah. See ya. Have a good weekend.